saw a lot of people in your own network who were having challenges transitioning. But was there an inner calling or some sort of an inspiration that kind of propelled you to shift from a stable career? Because we all know entrepreneurship is full of challenges.
Right out of college, which was to, get a job, make some money, and be independent, right? But after 5, 6 years, you might develop new interests. You might want to change countries where you don't even have the same kind of job opportunities available that you had in your previous region.
What is the best career advice you have ever received?
Okay, so one is that whatever advice you get, don't blindly follow it. Think about it very critically and independently on your own, and until and unless it passes through your own internal filters.
Hi, I'm your host Pamela from Bangalore, India, and you're tuned into Season 2 of Transition Story. You're about to hear an enriching story driven by self-belief, passion, a lot of resilience, and personal growth. I'm so excited to welcome our next guest to the show.
Hi, Arjun. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'll briefly introduce you to the audience. As a founder of Pivot, Arjun has been on a mission to help professionals really transform their careers through AI-driven roles and expert mentorship. With a background in compensation management and human resources, Arjun brings a wealth of knowledge and insights into career transitions and leadership growth. So, today we will dive into his journey from corporate into entrepreneurship and uncover some strategies for all our listeners as to how to best navigate careers and have a fulfilling career using some of the tools like Pivot. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and talk a little bit about your initial years and what transpired you to accept those corporate jobs that you very well did for a couple of years?
Sure. Thanks again for having me, Pamela. Excited to be doing this. So, yeah, about myself, I've been born and raised in India near New Delhi, a small town called Meerut, which some people might know of. And then for high schooling, I actually went to Gurgaon, where I studied in International Baccalaureate. That particular program prepares you to usually study outside India because most of the curriculums within India are not very well geared, or at least were not very well geared for IB program. And so my initial goal when I was looking at higher education options was to go to US primarily. And so I applied to several universities and was fortunate enough to get a seat with New York University. Right. And I traveled to US when I was just 17, right? That was the first time I had ever been to US and went there on my own. So it was a pretty exhilarating, also nerve-wracking kind of an experience. But I think the biggest impact that experience had on me was made me truly independent, because when you're a 17-year-old in a new country on your own, it just pushes you beyond your limits and your comfort zone, right? So yeah, that's the beginning of my journey. And then, I studied economics and stats in college. After graduation, I landed a job just around the financial crisis. Again, got pretty lucky to get a job at that time with a management consulting firm based in New York. And as you rightly said, what this firm focused on was talent management, HR, executive rewards, and performance related consulting. So, not your typical McKinsey, Bain, BCG kind of consulting, slightly more niche and focused towards helping companies manage their people practices better. And I initially was unsure how it's going to be because it's a relatively niche segment within consulting. But I ended up really liking it because it exposed me to a lot of great companies and work with some of the smartest talent there is within US, within New York. So people, who serve on the board of directors of these companies or in the senior leadership teams were our clients. So we would frequently have detailed discussions about the business strategies with them. So it gave me a lot of good exposure. And then I think in 2018, I felt like I had spent enough time within this field, and I also had spent about a decade in US, and I just wanted to be closer to India at that time. I had lived away from my family for way too long, for more than half my life. So I decided to move back to India, and I joined Mercer, which is another large HR consulting firm. In fact, it's one of the largest with over $6 billion in revenues. And I joined as their executive rewards business leader. So I helped them build that practice from the ground up and grow it pan India. Did that for about 2 years, and that's when I started thinking about this business idea I'd had for some time to help people make smoother career transitions, right? Without taking up too much time, basically, I had come across a lot of people in my own life and in my network who were very seriously considering changing career paths, like domains, their industry, their level in the organization or countries. And I felt like the world was not really prepared to help these people because their journeys were very challenging. A lot of them shared with me that they got super demoralized or kind of gave up on the idea because it was just so challenging, right? So I felt like this was a problem worth solving for various reasons. And in late 2020, I decided to give it a fair shot. I started working towards building my current company, which is Pivot, and it's been about 4 years now since we have been there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And while I was listening to you, so many memories were coming back because, I started my career as a HR consultant as well. Of course, in the tech side, where I was trying to implement HR software. So when you said Mercer, it rang a bell because for compensation benchmarking, Mercer was one of the products which most of the customers that we were working with were using. Now, you did describe this quite well that you saw a lot of people in your own network who were having challenges transitioning, but was there a inner calling or some sort of a inspiration that kind of propelled you to shift from a stable career? Because we all know entrepreneurship is full of challenges, and we will discuss that down the line in the conversation. But what really inspired you to leave all that luxury, all that stability, and embrace something which was, of course, uncertain because you had something in your mind. 3.5 years you've been doing it. Of course, it has come to some shape and form now, but it was not the same when you started. So, share with us a little more about what transpired in your mind when you were tracing some journey like this.
Sure. There's this there are many quotes around this. Two of my favorite quotes around this specific point that I want to kind of emphasize. One is from Mark Zuckerberg, which says something around that the biggest risk that you can take today is not taking enough risks in your career. And then there's another one from one of my favorite TV shows, Ted Lasso, where he says, if you're too comfortable doing something that you're doing, you're probably not doing it right. So both of these quotes, what they allude to is that today's careers are not static. They're extremely dynamic, right? So there are a lot of times that you can have stable career, but still get competed out by new tools, new people, new skill set, which you don't necessarily see coming. And a lot of times, it's not that somebody else is going to replace you, but that you as a human just evolve and you change over a period of time. So I had myself gone through this evolution and I had seen people very close to me, like my own wife, my own best friends. What they started with is something that probably aligned with their priorities right out of college, which was to, get a job, make some money, and be independent, right? But after 5, 6 years, you might develop new interests. You might want to change countries where you don't even have the same kind of job opportunities available that you had in your previous region, or so many other things, right, that drive us. So rather than kind of pushing these feelings down or staying stuck within your current role and, just forcing yourself to be happy in a place where you're not, I think it is always better to figure out how to get unstuck, how to move forward and account for the, new priorities that you have developed in your life. So generally speaking, I think if you are not able to pursue your desire or your dream, if you are feeling really stuck in your current role, or you feel like you're at risk of being replaced by a new technology or by other people, I think these are the most common instances where people feel like I should be doing something else. And I wanted to create a platform that would help people achieve this better.
We did understand a little bit about your career transition story. Great starting point. How Pivot was born. You were trying to solve this problem of people embracing different careers based on their passion and their goal that evolves in life as they move on. How does Pivot leverage AI or technology to empower people to traverse this whole path? What exactly it's trying to solve in the personalized mentorship space? Because as you know, this podcast is about transition story, like, about people traversing career transitions. So I would love to really unpack that a little bit and understand from you if people listening to this want to use Pivot, how do they really understand that AI can help them get more tools to their disposal and how can it be more personalized in terms of mentorship?
Sure. So, yeah, I think AI definitely has a lot of use cases, some of which we have already incorporated into our platform and some of which we are still working on. But, if I was to kind of talk about it at a high level, basically AI's use case today, prima facie for most customers, like if you think about the most common tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and all that, most individual consumers are using it to reduce the time it takes to produce certain output or to improve the quality of that output. Those are the two main things that people are using it for, right?
Content generation, basically.
Yes, yes, content generation. But even in content generation, like there could be many different things, right? Like, for example, you could be generating content which is going to go on your website or on social media or something like that. So that is your main content. But there's other type of content that you might be not putting out there, but you're generating ideas. For example, you say, hey, I want to grow my company from X to Y. Give me 5 strategies that will help me do that. Right? That's not content generation. That's more like idea generation in a way, right? So there are different things that can happen, but essentially it's to save time and effort and to produce better quality. I think that is exactly what AI is being used for, even when it comes to career transition space or job search space. So there are certain tasks to be done when you are thinking about a new role. For example, understanding what kind of a role is going to be the best fit for me if I'm pivoting from, let's say, my current domain to a new domain, right? Understanding what kind of skills I have which are most relevant for my new role versus the ones that I lack that I want to strengthen further, right? And then obviously preparing your job applications like your resume, your LinkedIn, your cover letters, and preparing for interviews. So almost everything which is part of this process has a use case for AI, right? So AI can help you firstly reduce a lot of the time it takes to think through these things in a deep manner, right? For example, we have this framework which we call self-reflection or introspection framework, where we start by asking you certain basic questions about your skills, interests, and priorities at this stage. And based on that, whatever information is shared by users, we utilize AI plus human judgment. So, by the way, we don't only depend on AI, there is humans involved, and I'll talk more about that. But we utilize AI as a key component in taking that input that users have shared with us and giving them some interesting role recommendations that would align with their future career priorities. So rather than just doing that research on Google in a very manual way, it reduces your time and effort by, I would say, at least 50%, if not more, right? And it improves the quality of your outcomes as well because AI can process through that data and give you very personalized recommendations rather than just very broad or generic recommendations, depending on how the algorithm is developed or how the prompts are developed, right? So I think that's one of the biggest use cases. The other thing is in terms of personalized mentorship, and you were talking about that. So I have always believed that learning and career guidance is something that is very unique to each individual. Yes, there are certain best practices that apply generically to the masses, but even if there are two product managers working at the same company, they could have very different backgrounds, skill sets, and future goals, right? So what I tell one product manager working at Facebook does not necessarily mean it will apply 100% to the other PM at the same company. So for that, you need to have one-on-one discussions. You need to go deep within, your overall profile, within your future priorities, within your strengths and gaps, and other key factors related to your career profile, right? And that's where we have built this one-on-one personalized mentorship marketplace where we connect you to industry experts in your target role who have spent at least 25 years in your target field, and you have one-on-one discussions over video calls and get very personalized feedback. So that kind of what we are working on. But where we really differentiate is that these are structured mentorship sessions, so they are not just agenda-less conversations where you're just, seeing if it's a, free virtual chat, whether something's going to work out or not doesn't matter. These have specific agenda. There is a, stepwise process where you discuss certain things first, work on the action items, and then move forward in the process, right? So I think the key to mentorship, it is a little more goal-oriented and more structured and personalized as opposed to just having it without any goals or without any agenda, without any structure. So that's kind of what we have been trying to do.
Excellent. So it's a good combination of technology coming at play, and then you are bringing in an expert in the whole mix to ensure that people have all the ammunition that they need to really navigate a career change, which is very, very interesting. Now, it also compels me to ask the next question. You have a success story of someone who transformed their career through pivot. We don't want details of the person's name. We can be anonymous, but any success story that you want to share with us that will also, establish some sort of an assurance in people's mind who are listening to this about how pivot has actually created some of these career transitions live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are thousands of stories today, thankfully, and each story is very interesting and unique in its own way. But I think some of my favorite stories, they're usually the ones where the goal that was achieved was challenging and very ambitious. Like we weren't 100% sure when we started working on it whether that would be possible. So one such story was of this user who came to us. I think it was back in 2023, and she actually was a stay-at-home mom with an IIT degree. So she had prior experience and worked in primarily software development, and did that for about 7-8 years. Then started a family and took a break for about, I think it was about a year to 2 years kind of a break, and then wanted to come back into the workforce, but not in the same type of role, because she just felt like it wasn't the right fit for her and she wanted to do something different. So one of the things that we realized was, what kind of skill set she had besides software development. And what we realized is she was very good at research, like very deep research work, right? That's something that she had actually done within IIT as well. Like she had a lot of research papers published, etc. And we identified research oriented roles as one of the main target field for her. For that, we had to do a couple of things to get her prepared for the new kind of role. Number one was connect her to these industry experts so that she could understand within research today what are the most in demand skills that employers are looking for. Because research is not, it might sound like a very small niche kind of a field, but it's really exploding given that AIML has a lot of research requirements that are taking place at a deep level. Similar to, I mean, what DeepSeek has come out with, for example, require a lot of research work, right? So first, understanding within this broad field, what are the most important things that she should have focused on from a skill acquisition standpoint, from an emerging trend standpoint, from a career trajectory standpoint. So those connections with experts who are working in that area was, I think, one of the most game changing things for her. The other thing was to understand what kind of courses would fit her specific priorities. So this is again a stay-at-home mom, young kids, and doesn't want to take up a job or a course which will be extremely time consuming or let's say not budget friendly. So we had to identify the right courses for upskilling. And when you have all these constraints that you're working within, it can be a little challenging, right? Because ultimately you want to gain the right skills, but in a very flexible manner, right? So we helped her do that. After that, we helped her optimize her CV and LinkedIn profile, helped her prepare certain portfolio which showcased her research skills, and finally helped her search for jobs where we were able to source certain referrals as well, where we had connections. She ended up interviewing at one of the largest research companies, talent research companies in the world. So they do HR oriented research. And she got the role. To this day, at least, we have received more than 10 referrals from her. So I think she was quite satisfied, I would say.
Sure, she must be very happy in her current job because some of these transitions are very common, very trivial because many people take breaks for different reasons. 5 years back, a maternity break was very normalized. However, today, even men taking breaks is normalized. People might just be burnt out and they want to take a break and then explore their next big gig. So it's very common, and I'm sure the story would inspire a lot of people to really double click on Pivot and see what it has to offer. Now, a good segue from here into the conversation would be to understand career transition trends and advice a little bit from you. So, what are the biggest career transition challenges that you have seen professionals facing? I did hear you in that story you mentioned somebody wanting to move from A to B and not having the skills for doing what B is, or having extreme strength in something in which they don't have a qualification and they might have to acquire it through a course. But apart from that, what are some of the big challenges that you have observed in your experience leading Pivot?
See, the type of challenges that you're talking about, those are common, right? Most people, if you're transitioning, meaning you're leaving some area of familiarity behind to venture into uncharted territories. I mean, that is a common problem that everybody will face in terms of identifying what are your transferable skills, what are your gaps, how do you bridge your gaps in an effective manner. And that's not an easy problem to solve, because essentially you're competing with folks who either have more experience than you in that field, or you're competing with folks who don't have a lot of experience. They might be at a similar level in terms of expertise, but they are much junior in terms of the position level, and hence they are cheaper resource for companies to hire, as opposed to hiring you, where you might be expecting 30-40%, 50% more than the cheaper resource. So there is this sort of conundrum where you are, even if you upskill, not able to compete with the other talent which has experience in the field, right? So for that, you have to figure out two things, right? One is, how do you differentiate yourself from this crowd? Because if you try to fit in too much with the same kind of crowd, you're always going to be lagging behind, right? You're never going to be able to be better than a person who has more experience than you if you say that I'm great at this particular skill that this person is also good at. Similarly, you can't say that, I'm a cheap resource or I'll take a huge pay cut, because that's kind of self-debilitating, right? You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So you can't compete with cheaper resources either. The best thing is to typically not hide your prior experience, rather utilize that to make a compelling pitch for why that experience could be beneficial for the target company, right? For example, a lot of times when, let's say, you have worked in a non-tech field and you're trying to transition to tech, which a lot of folks do, they face this challenge. So in our view, there are experiences that you might have had in your non-tech role, in your non-tech field, which are still relevant for these tech companies. For example, there are several sales professionals who have transitioned from non-tech to tech, right? And they do it because there are better paying opportunities in tech for sales professionals, right? And it's more structured. There's more clientele to be dealt with. So even though they may not have sold tech products, they may not have the tech knowledge to qualify as the number one candidate for this. What can help is when you figure out, okay, I spent 10 years in banking, right, non-tech field, and as a sales professional, now I want to transition to tech or fintech. Now, how do I leverage that experience and make the company, the fintech company or my target companies, believe that my banking experience can be very relevant to you? Sometimes it's a skill set that might be overlapping. Sometimes it's your connections, your network, right? You might be able to bring a lot of clients from your prior role to your next one. Other times it could be that, there are certain insights you have gotten in your prior role which apply to your new one. For example, if there's a lot of regulation that's happening within the banking sector, you can bring that to the tech sector and tell them about developing new tech products to solve those regulatory or those compliance related problems, right? So there could be new product opportunities that come through these insights. So I think one of the biggest challenges is this, right? How do you compete with people who are more experienced than you or are cheaper resource? The other thing is, most people, I think, just don't really have a strategy in place, right? They just start in a very unscattered way, which to me, I think, they say if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail, kind of a thing. So it's basically that if you can, achieve ambitious goals like career transition just through trial and error and random experimentation, everybody would be able to do it. But the success rate for career transition is actually quite low. And one of the biggest reasons is people don't have a playbook. They are just looking at career coaches or other influencers saying random stuff online, following that on their own, not really getting anywhere, and then ultimately realizing it's not working and giving up, right? So rather than doing that, wouldn't it be better to have some sort of a playbook which focuses on the most important, most high ROI action items and gives you at least some sense of confidence that you're moving in the right direction? There's still no guarantee, right? Because you can't have a 100% guarantee of anything in life. But at least you know that instead of having a 10% probability, you have a closer to 50% probability of changing your career.
Now let's, the last part of the conversation, rapid fire questions, short answers. So what is the best career advice you have ever received?
Okay, so one is that whatever advice you get, don't blindly follow it. Think about it very critically and independently on your own. And until and unless it passes through your own internal filters, don't just follow it, right? So that's how you develop good, I guess, instinct, good, gut check, all of that. The second one, which I think was even more important, was that, one of my bosses, he told me that, yeah, I was thanking him at the end of like a performance evaluation discussion and got a good raise and a promotion and all that stuff. And I was just thanking him. And he just said this very simply. He said, Arjun, you don't need to thank me. As long as you are making other people's lives better or easier, people are going to continue to invest in you and reward you accordingly. So I think I really like those words. Adding value to other people's lives and improving or making their lives better. I think as long as we all continue to do that through our work, we will also do well in our careers.
Very nice. Next one. One book or resource every professional should read.
Resource, I would say Pivot. If you want to talk about a book, I think one of the books that I really liked, and it's not a very typical book, it's a biography of Vincent Van Gogh, who's an artist. And it's called Lust for Life by Irving Stone. It's a classic, actually, but not many people know of it today. It's all about like Van Gogh's life, about how he tried his best in his career to become a successful artist, but failed miserably during his life, never achieved any success at all until much later after he had died, right? And now he's considered one of the top artists. So I think it's all about like what motivates you when you're not able to achieve success. And I think that's the number one thing we all could learn from is resilience. What motivates you when you don't see any success in your life? How do you still keep giving your best? I think that's one of the best things I learned from that book.
What's your biggest lesson that you learned starting Pivot?
That you're not going to make right decisions always. You just sometimes have to make decisions first and then do your best to prove them right.
Very nice. That's why I said you are spontaneous. That's great. If you had to start Pivot again, how would you explore it?
How would I do it differently, you mean?
Yeah.
I think one thing I would do is probably hire or get full-time employees much faster. So actually, when we first launched in mid 2021, I was just a one-man show. I had partnered with a few freelancers and a couple of part-time collaborators, but there was no full-time person apart from me. So yeah, I think I would definitely do that differently. I would have either a co-founder or some good quality hires right away.
That is such same, pieces of advice and some great stories that we heard today. So Arjun, thank you so much for this time. And I'm sure listeners can connect with you on LinkedIn or learn more about Pivot through your website, which we will put in the last page of the podcast. And any final advice for someone stuck in a job that they no longer enjoy before we close?
The world has made us feel like we have to keep doing something, even if we don't enjoy because of, various reasons. And I just want to say that you don't have to force yourself to do anything, right? Do what makes you feel like it's aligned with your current, happiness factors, your priorities, whatever really gives you joy. And sometimes it might mean that you have to compromise on passion because of pay, and that's okay, right? But make very deliberate decisions. Know that you don't have to be stuck. There are support platforms and people out there who can help you. So don't feel stuck. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Excellent. I would invite all listeners to go ahead and check out Pivot and see they can explore it for their career transitions or not. And once again, Arjun, thank you so much for dialing in and talking to me. I would love to explore more conversations with you as Pivot is also progressing in its journey of growing into a bigger, better organization, touching more lives, as you rightly said, bringing value to people's career, having more testimonials.
Thanks so much, Pamela. This was fun and I really enjoyed the conversation.